Good. So we are live, right? Yeah. Good. All right, people. So welcome everyone who are here with us today. I'm really sorry about my voice. I have a bad sinus problem because of a recent and sudden cold in São Paulo. But I think you can bear with a little bit of a nasal voice through your ears. I hope I don't sound like Fran Fine, but it should sound a bit okay. All right, people. So we're going just to share our screen, and then we can begin our class. I'm using Canva for the presentation because I do have some animations that I would like to introduce. So bear with me if we have some problems or slowness, because sometimes it can be like that. All right, everybody can see it? Yes? Good. Yep. All right. So welcome, everyone. It's a great pleasure to have you here for this class, this open class, hosted by A Book a Month on a very interesting and popular and talented writer as Edgar Allan Poe. Today we're talking about The Black Cat, which is one of the short stories that we have started reading this semester in A Book a Month. So you're having access to a glimpse of what we offer to our students on a regular basis. And I'll start just by introducing myself, just for you to know me. I don't know if we possibly talked through WhatsApp or maybe through Instagram. I'm the person behind our media. And well, so I'm Anna. If you never see me, this is me. I actually am a teacher and also the founder of A Book a Month. A Book a Month is almost 3 years old. And it's a very interesting project that has been thriving since then. And I'm a postdoc at the moment, doing my postdoc here in São Paulo. It's a fellowship called Mesila, which is financed by the University of Cologne in Germany. And mainly I'm a PhD in comparative literature. This is what I mostly do and study, right? I do study different kinds of literatures and I put them in comparison, which is one of the things that I like the most. I've also done my master's degree in a multi-institutional master's program called Erasmus Mundus. I don't know if you heard of something like that before. But because of this program, I got the chance to study in 3 different universities in Europe, the University of Sheffield in England, the University of Santiago de Compostela in Spain, and also the Nova de Lisboa in Portugal, right? And also I mastered in comparative literature. And so this is me, and Lau, I think Audi would like to introduce himself.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm Audio. I'm the other teacher here at A Book a Month, and I'm also a PhD in comparative literature as well. I took my degree in the University of Padua in Italy, where I also took my master's also in literature at the University of Bologna, with 2 exchanges in the University of Strasbourg in France and in Thessaloniki in Greece. And I'm also the host of a podcast about literature and medicine, literature and science, that is called Literatura Viral, in which, and it's free, you can find in Spotify or whatever you look for podcasts. And there are a few episodes on writers we have already discussed in A Book a Month. So Edgar Allan Poe, for example, or Susan Sontag, or Roth, or H.G. Wells, and the list goes on. So you might wish to check if you like, and it's all for free. So today, our idea for this open class is to show you what exactly is a book a month and how it works in case you're interested. If you're not, that's great. We're friends, and you can join the content and give us your feedback. So basically, we have two objectives with this project. The first one is that a book a month is a method to practice and improve language. So this is one of our concerns here. So we try to create an environment of total immersion, let's say, in which you're reading, you're reading in a foreign language, you're listening to classes in a foreign language, and you're communicating with others in a foreign language. And we do that while learning literature. So that's the second, and both are equally important, right? We're both literature professors here that are currently working within academia, and then a book a month is our side project that goes straight to the heart, right? So the idea is that to learn about literature and to practice English both at the same time. And the class today will be discussing Edgar Allan Poe, The Black Cat. And this is part of one of our courses that is called Short Stories, in which you have classes every week on Tuesdays for an hour and a half. And students read one short story a week, basically up to 10 pages. So it's not a great amount of reading materials. I mean, you would spend 20 minutes perhaps a week reading for this class. And Edgar Allan Poe is one of the authors we are discussing this semester, but alongside many others like Shirley Jackson or Oscar Wilde. We'll discuss Nabokov, the Russian writer that writes both in Russian and English. Chinua Achebe from Nigeria, great author, extremely important for post-colonial literature. We'll be discussing Ursula Le Guin, that specializes in fantastical and sci-fi literature. Flannery O'Connor, very talented writer from the 20th century literature in the US, and then Mark Twain, a super classic. So this is our reading list for this semester. And I think that's it. Anna?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the presentation and introduction, Audio. Let's just do some, not house rules, but just like some information from you, for you actually. Whenever you want to speak something, even if we are speaking, you can do it, but we just ask you to use the buttons to raise your hand, because there's a lot of us, so in order to organize comments, it would be nice. Feel free to use the chat to ask questions, to make comments, to interact among yourself, and also to do some comments about who you're speaking. Then as we go, I can try to follow some of that, and then after class we can discuss them as well. All right, people. So let's talk about Edgar Allan Poe. And my question to you first is: have you ever read anything by Edgar Allan Poe besides The Black Cat? I'm assuming that the answer is positive. Yes, maybe Audio can help me with the chat.
Yeah, the answer is a bit mixed. Many people have, but some people have not. Yep.
Okay. Good. All right. So this is also an opportunity to be introduced to this writer. Well, Edgar Allan Poe, usually when we talk about him, he's more or less like a synonym to horror stories, right? This is usually what we think of when we think of the name Edgar Allan Poe. Just by looking at his face, oh my God, every time I check his photographs, I feel a bit sad because he looks like so poor. So I don't know, like it's just something that comes to my mind, right? So he was a person who used to write about different kinds of genres, right? the mystery, something that is horrific, some crime, some investigation. But I think that he's much more well known for his work with horror, right? So some of the famous examples are for sure the short stories, The Fall of the House of Usher, very famous one, The Telltale Heart, The Mask of Red Death, and also the narrative poem, The Raven, right? The raven that calls nevermore and nevermore. Possibly you have heard this motto before, right? So his stories are usually like connected to the representation of something that is horrific, but also there are some things behind it, like literary references, maybe ethical kinds of questions about whether guilt is something that should be thought about. Mostly I think that you have noticed that in The Black Cat as well, right? It's not only about the cat itself, the crime, but also about the feelings that the narrator character tries to convey to its readers. Yes. And I think that also Poe, well, he has written some interesting stories on the genre of crime and investigation. Although these stories, they are not very well known. I have the impression that they are not very well known as attributed to him, right? But these stories, they were very interesting, and they show some interesting elements that we're going to see appearing much later, maybe like 40 or 50 years later, or even more, in writers and characters such as Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, and also Hercule Poirot by Agatha Christie, right? So if you check the dates, you'll see that most of these stories, they were published in the 40s, the 1840s. And they all feature this detective here, Auguste Dupin, who does this kind of investigative and very intelligent and witty thought on ways to describe the reasons and the motives behind a crime in order to solve these crimes, which we see coincidentally about 40 years after In a Study in Scarlet in 1887, published by Arthur Conan Doyle. Right? So it's very interesting that these works by Poe, they're not very well known, but they do have much quality and they're very intriguing and interesting to read. Yeah, so if you liked The Black Cat and if you want to read more by Poe, here are, of course, some suggestions for you. Yes. And yes, so we can start talking a little bit more about the core of the story. Yes, so we're talking about a story that is mostly connected to an idea of something that is horror, that is horrific in some ways, and we attribute that to some of Edgar Allan Poe's maybe influences or maybe his preferences when he's creating literature. Yes, and this is what we call Gothic fiction, which was very common in the 18th and the 19th century in the UK, but somehow it also appears a lot in stories in American literature and also in other countries, and even in Brazil, like we do have some examples as well. So Gothic fiction is usually characterized by some of the things that we intuitively already know. For example, the environment of fear, these old buildings that somehow represent a connection to the supernatural. Always the past is coming back as maybe producing some kinds of encounters with ghosts, with forms that are scary. And characters that are haunted by guilt, by their past, and even something that could be connected to crimes, even mostly when we're talking about Edgar Allan Poe. And some examples that are connected to Gothic fiction, possibly you have heard some of these names before. I would say that Dracula is for sure one of the most well-known by Bram Stoker. Also Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, Yes, it's a very famous novel as well. Although it does have some kind of romantic side to it, it also plays a lot with this idea of something that is supernatural and houses that are very big and full of mysteries to be discovered. The same thing goes for American literature, for example, Nathaniel Hawthorne, The House of Seven Gables. Nathaniel Hawthorne is the author of The Scarlet Letters. Possibly you have heard about this book before. The Bride of Lammermoor by Sir Walter Scott, the author of Ivanhoe, and one of the most interesting stories that are like a very important point for Gothic fiction, which is The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. Yes, so these are some examples of Gothic fiction that sometimes are also connected with something that is romantic, because the romanticism also embraces it a lot. Yes, even in Jane Austen's last, one of Jane Austen's last novel, Northanger Abbey, we do have some kinds of touches of Gothic fiction, maybe on the mockery side, but very interesting indeed. Yes. So let's talk about the black cat. Yes. When we talk about black cats, usually what comes to our minds are black cats as a common sign of a bad omen. Have you ever heard of that? Are you afraid of black cats in any way? Are you superstitious with black cats? You can speak if you want to, just use your unmute your mic.
Not really. I'm sorry, I had to.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I can see you, Marília.
I really love cats and black cats, but I'm not superstition about that. So I consider them, well, normal cats like other cats.
Like any other.
Like any other, yes.
Even cuter, right?
Yes, even cuter.
Yes.
Sure, that's it.
I know. But is it something that you see nowadays, or is it something that you would say it would be more a belief that belongs to the past? Or do you see like people thinking that black cats are actually a sign of bad omen nowadays?
Yes, many people I know consider black cats as bad omen. Yes, most of people I know consider and have this superstition about black cats.
Mm-hmm.
But when you read some literature, or the most of the stories related to black cats are like horror stories, or yes, with involved with mystery stories, and
Witches.
then yes, and we started building this thing when you read or when you see some like horror movies. Yes, when you see black cats, it's very common.
Good.
They are very cute.
Thank you, Marília. Does anybody have another comment?
Yeah,
Yes, you.
I read today in English and the translation from Companhia das Letras,
Right.
and I found it interesting to see that in the original, the part when he says that cats are the personification of enemies, in the translation it was called that it was a personification of sorcerers. They included this word specifically.
Right, yeah, witches in disguise, right? This is the term that Poe uses to refer to. Yes, very good. All right, people. And in general, do you think that Brazil is a superstitious country? Do you think that most people are superstitious, or are you superstitious yourself? I'm seeing heads nodding, but I'm just going to ask you, are you sure? sometimes we don't even notice that we are superstitious, right? When we see, we're just like knocking on wood and just doing things that we don't even realize that are happening. No superstitious people at all? Nothing? Okay. I'm not superstitious as well. I think, did somebody say something?
I was going to say something.
Please go.
I think our superstitions aren't just, they're a bit religious too. Like we have many, like some traditions that are from like Catholicism and
Yes.
Spiritism. There are some people see as superstition. And I think black cats are included in that. I mean, from what I see.
So you think you would be like connected to something that is more to the side of religion?
In my mind, yes, like maybe my experience seeing people react differently to cats and other sorts of superstition, like you're seeing in the Catholic Church, some people have this like, oh, it's an evil animal.
Right, right. Poor cats. Thank you very much, Maria. All right, people. So, well, as contrary to what we might originally think, right? Well, there are many cultures around the world, and of course, like these cultures, they do not see cats as evil or as good omens in the same way, right? All different societies, they might have some kind of different perception to black cats. Some of them can be positive associations even, and others can have like some kind of negative association, and others it's just like indifferent, right? Just a regular cat. Yes. And I'm very interested in the positive associations that black cats might have. Yes. And when we're talking about Celtic cultures and Japanese folklore and Scottish culture as well, usually it can be, there can be like a connection with a positive association with black cats. So if you see, for example, this little limerick or something like a little verse about black cats that have Celtic origin, says, a black cat, I've heard it said, can charm all ill away and keep the house wherein she dwells from fever's deadly sway. As if cats were possibly capable, black cats were possibly capable of just removing any kind of illnesses from the house. So they bring health instead of a bad omen, right? So it's a different perspective when we're discussing black cats. You will also notice that whenever we have some interesting or different words that I might think that might be new to you in some ways, there is a glossary here, right? So whenever you don't find or you don't know the answer, you can refer to this glossary. Yes, Fabio, please.
Hey, thanks. I was thinking just now, having reread the text this afternoon, he does refer a lot to religion in the text, and in many other texts as well. And he does mention that the cat is supposedly like a witch. So I was thinking, isn't he like, he also mentions like, he refers to the cat as the arch fiend, the arch enemy, I guess, at some point. And isn't he implying that it's like, yeah, another kind of entity, like the cat has agency? It's like, isn't it more than just a superstition, you know? I was thinking of
it is actually. We're going to get there. There are some traditions that Poe is referring to. We are digging in there a little bit later, but you're right, for sure. Like he's talking about an entity, yes. And this is what we're going to discuss in a few slides. So you're guessing right up, Fabio. Thank you. All right, people. So we do have some representations of black cats as bad omens as well, like mostly in Western culture, if we can say like that. Yes. And as some of you have mentioned, I also think that some of these connections might be directly connected to some kind of repression of many ways, or maybe impersonation of devils, demons of some kind. Yes. So one of the things that we see mentioned in the story is cats as being familiars of witches, or maybe shape-shifting witches. Yes, when we talk about familiars, possibly you have seen these names before in this series of books by Philip Pullman called His Dark Materials. They're very famous books, very interesting trilogy. They have also been transformed into a TV series and also a film, right? So an interesting way for us to understand what familiars are is this representation here, right? We have a person who is also always accompanied by a little animal of some kind. And this animal is not just an animal companion, it's a familiar, because this familiar has a kind of connection much more deeper than just like a companion animal. And so it is as if this black cat would be the representative of a soul of a witch, or maybe like a possible way of this witch to be transformed in some ways. Yeah, so the same concept that Philip Pullman seems to apply here also dialogues with this tradition of familiars concerning witches as well. Yes. And also we do have some beliefs that cats and black cats, they are a relevant part of witchcraft. Yes, as we see referred in 16th century, 17th, 18th century kinds of traditions. Yes, and also in some perceptions, maybe black cats, they seem to be like bad omens because they resemble facially demons in some ways. Yeah, so it could be a different perspective as well. Yes. Famous black cats that we see in media, TV series, films, and all, possibly you will remember some of these. Yes, the famous Salem in Sabrina the Teenage Witch. She used to have a black cat, Salem, and they are very connected. And also in the TV series adaptation that was recently done on Netflix, there is a similar connection with the black cat as well. Yes. The famous Binks in Hocus Pocus, Abracadabra. I don't know if you remember this film. It was probably done during the 80s or early 2000s. I don't remember. I think it's, no, not the 80s, the 90s, I think. It was one of my favorites when I was a child. And there was this black cat, Binks. And also Snowball in The Simpsons, a very famous black cat as well. Yes. And also Phoenix Cat, one of my favorites as well. A cartoon that, I don't know if it's still running nowadays, but I believe that it was running as a famous cartoon for a long time. Yes, on Cartoon Network and even on Globo or something like that. All right, but what about Poe's cat? In your opinion, why do you think that Poe has chosen a cat for the story, specifically a cat? Not other animal, not any other color, but a black cat. What can you tell me? Do you think it would work well if you would have chosen a different animal to do so? To function as like this character? No? No one or no opinion you don't want to say? Let me see if there's something in chat. Cats are mysterious, yes.
I don't really think so. I don't really think he could use another animal. Perhaps he could use a raven that is also tied to the same symbology. But I mean, who would own a pet raven? It's a bit odd, right? So,
yeah.
so I think, yeah.
There are people, well, well, strange pets are spread around everywhere, but I mean, like the symbology connected to the black cat, it is what makes this the story goes as it goes, right? If it was like some, well, maybe a black puppy, it wouldn't have the same meaning, the same symbology. So of course, this is like Edgar Allan Poe is actually playing with the symbology behind the black cat, something that is popular, something that is well known to everybody, in order to play with our own ideas about and superstitions about the black cat. Yes. So some of the things that you will see in the story connected to the behavior of cat, and this is where we can start by introducing some cat verbs and cat behavior, some of which appear in the story, possibly purring for sure. I think that in some point he uses the word climbing, yes, and I put it here just for you to be connected to some of the vocabulary used by Poe in his story. So purring during the home sound that cats usually do, grooming, the cleaning of the body, kneading is when they are doing this. In Portuguese, we say amassar pãozinho, right, when they do this with their claws, and climbing, which is something that usually they do very easily as well. It's part of their behavior. Yes. So let's start talking a little bit more about the text itself. So The Black Cat, it was published in 1843. It is a first-person narrator, right? We also consider this narrator to be unreliable in many ways, mostly because it's first person, and he's always trying to convince us otherwise that he has done something, that he wants us to understand his side on why he has done such things, despite being very connected to pets and to animals, but something magical has happened, right? But on the other side, we do have some important things that are approached in this short story. We're talking about feelings as guilt and regret, mostly because we start the story with the person trying to even not apologize, but maybe trying to give us his reasons and motives for this sudden moment of insanity. And also on the side, he also maybe uses, or the author uses this story in order to talk about alcoholism as something that is evil in some ways, and that could be connected to other types of bad feelings and actions, like the capability of committing acts of violence and hate causing death, right? So these would be some main elements that we see in the story. Now, I would very much appreciate if somebody could tell me what happens in the story, just like a little brief summary. Anybody could volunteer for this very tough task? Just give us an outline of the events.
I guess I can try.
Go, Fabio, please.
So, yeah, so basically the narrator, who's the protagonist, has a good relationship with people and animals in general, right? Wife and pet. And at one point that changes, and he first takes the eye out of the cat and subsequently murders it, hangs it. The house catches on fire. They survive, and there's an ominous image of a hung cat on the only wall that was left of the burnt house. And yeah, so he starts feeling guilty, and in the other house they find a new black cat with only one thing that is different, which is in the white blob on his chest, and which is a cat that is just mysteriously appears into the scene, right? Because there's no connection. The landlord doesn't know where the cat's from, so which is completely weird. And so he starts having the same feelings again with the second cat, towards the second cat, and when he gets exasperated by the behavior of the cat, he wants to kill the cat with an axe. His wife prevents it, and then he ends up cutting his wife's hand, and immediately afterwards, very much like Raskolnikov, just smashes her on the head with the axe and kills her. And and then goes on to plot how to get rid of the body, buries it in the wall. Perfect plan. The cat had disappeared by that time, probably out of terror from that scene. He's happy until the police comes around, searches the house a couple times, are happy that they haven't found anything, and he cannot contain himself and says, this is a very well constructed house indeed. And with his cane or something stick in his hand, knocks on the very place where he buried the wife's body. And at that point, they hear a shriek twice. The first one was muffled, and the second one was a high shriek. Immediately, they bring down the wall, find the body. And I completely forgot how the very end is, but that's sort of the last paragraph, I suppose.
Yeah. Then his crime is revealed.
Oh, and then he finishes by saying, you won't believe. All throughout the story, he's saying, I don't want you to believe me. He starts by saying that. All throughout the story, he says, I wouldn't believe it myself if you told me. And in the end, he says, unbelievable, I buried the cat in the wall with the body.
Yes. Always
So,
insinuating something supernatural is happening. This being has just yes. Thank you very much for the summary, Fabio. Very well done.
Appreciate it.
All right. So, we do have some, they are not very many characters in the story. We have the character narrator. We have Pluto. The first cat has a name, right? Pluto. And then the second cat just appears, and then it doesn't have a name which is stipulated. And then we have his wife. Yes. All of the story is full of meanings, and we're going to go through them, these meanings and some of these references one by one before we go into discussion. Yes. All right, so let's start talking about the name of this cat, Pluto, right? When we hear this name, usually we tend to associate either with Disney's Pluto, like the goofy Pluto, or when we are thinking about mythology, we think about Pluto, the ruler of the underworld, right? Which would be the equivalent to Hades, yes? But then Hades, when we think about the word Hades, we tend also to associate with the idea of the underworld itself, which also receives this name. So when we use Pluto, we are more identifying it with the person and the god itself as the ruler of the underworld. Yes, so usually Pluto is represented with Cerberus, the three-headed dog. Yes, you will also recognize this dog from Harry Potter's very famous scene. This is Hagrid's puppy, which is guarding some important secret. Yes, and this is also an example of a reference in wide mass media. Yes. Well, and when we're thinking about Pluto as Hades, usually we tend to associate it also with something that is somehow demonic of any ways. Yes. Not always it would be like this in Greek religion and mythology, because Pluto in Greek mythology is married to Persephone, who he has kidnapped from his mother while she was living on the world, and he just kidnaps her to live with him in the underworld. But then, like in other traditions, we also have a celebration of Pluto and Persephone as a couple that rules the equilibrium of the world. Yeah, so we do have kind of an ambiguous representation in like a cultural association with Pluto as well. Yes, Fab.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, but is that the view people would have at that time of Pluto? Because I feel like it would be purely a play with these superstition,
as the
let's
Greek,
say,
the ruler of the underworld, or you mean something different?
Yeah, I mean it's just it feels like it's just a far reference to, something that is like, oh, those non-Christians, and their wrong superstitions. But yeah, it feels like it wouldn't be. That would be my question, actually. So I don't know if people who would read Poe would have that, like, because I don't know if that's the American audience that I'm thinking of, because maybe the European audience would be more of would be more keen on the
more connected to mythology, for sure, right?
The mythology, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
Because I don't know, I feel like he's writing in contrast to this like Puritan tradition in America, in a way. Playing with the Christian God, as he mentions a lot of times, So I mean, it feels like it's much more like, oh, this is another name for the devil instead of the Christian devil instead of the Greek God, So that would be my question.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you're right, actually, Fabio. I agree with you. He is thinking about the devil for sure, but we also have to think that in the 19th century, their education in general is so much based on the classics, like every educated person in the US, a little bit less, but still it was so much more than what we usually do nowadays when we think about reading in Latin, knowing Latin and Greek authors. Like pretty much every intellectual in the hundreds could quote from Homer, for example, by memory, or from the Iliad. So I think it would be very familiar to his public. But I think one thing does not exclude the other, right? It can be at the same time one reference to Greek mythology, and at the same time being playing around with these ideas of witchcraft and Satan, all of these, which is definitely something Poe wants to do. Yeah, there are so many short stories about the Inquisition, things like that, right? So it's definitely a topic he loves.
Yeah. This reference to always some kind of a Christian God and some kind of a Christian Satan, even in the Raven, he says, to the Raven, it says something like, oh, this God that you and I adore, saying like, me, the Christian, you're the devil. Like they'll still adore, the devil still ultimately adores God, the Christian God, anyways. So anyways, I feel like that sort of what he's playing with, the Christian tradition in America, but yeah, one does not exclude the other, I suppose.
Yeah, and also this kind of play appears in other stories as well. Like in the Casca of Amontillado, there is this kind of reference as well. There is very clear when he says like, for the love of God, Montresor, and then he says, yes, for the love of God, right? So also it is much connected to that. One thing that I find interesting though, but I think it is not to give like an easy bite for his reader is not using the word, the name Hades instead of Pluto. He chooses Pluto maybe in order to personify like the person itself, and also maybe to make his reader dig deeper in the reference, right? And maybe he's just like connected to this kind of part of Greek mythology. Yes. Let me just see the chat. Rafaela is saying that, just to add something, in horoscope stuff, Pluto is related to death, and I think also it brings that idea. Oh, I didn't know that there is a Pluto connected to horoscope. Very interesting. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about that. Yes, Maria.
I just want to say that I understand what I think Fabio said, that like we have this view of in Christianity that it's very like a duality that maybe didn't exist at the time of like the Greeks. We think of Pluto or Hades as god of like death and the underworld, in the same way that we see the devil as being in the underworld. And maybe it wouldn't be like how it was seen in the past, but it's like our view. Would it be the same view that like people had in the time of Edgar Allan Poe?
Yeah, for sure. Although it's not equivalent, right? Greek mythology to Christianism, it would be like a way to comprehend it, for sure. Thank you, Maria. Yes, all right. And well, the narrator itself, right? A very interesting narrator for many reasons, and I think its unreliability, it would be one of which I would say makes it the most interesting. Let's start with the alibi. Yes, when he starts talking about his own experience, something that he wants to tell in this tale, he starts by stating his alibi, or maybe his excuse for doing something, in a way to make maybe stating his motives, and also a way to exempt himself from the guilt, stating his moment of momentarily insanity, or maybe something of the sort. Yes. I will volunteer you to read it, but if you don't want to read it, you can say so, yes. So maybe, Lani, if you would like to read this paragraph for us, I would be very grateful.
Oh, wow, the whole thing?
Only if you want to. If you don't want to, feel free just to say no.
I can read it.
All right.
For the most wild yet most homely narrative, which I am about to pen, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence. Yet mad am I not, and very surely do I not dream. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburden my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, a series of mere household events.
Thank you very much. I always laugh when I see like a mere household events, just like if it was just like doing the dishes or making the bed or doing something like that, or cooking, I don't know, right? But this is like the opening lines of the story. This is when we see how does this narrator behave, yes? And then he's pleading to us to believe in him, in what he has to say, yes? And he also says that tomorrow he is going to die, and then he needs to unburden his soul from what happened to him. And so he is inviting us to be sympathetic to what he wants to say. Yes, and here goes like when he's trying to make us believe that he is just innocent of something fiendish that has happened to him. Maybe, Marida, could you read from my infancy until maybe them here, And I don't know if Marilise could continue from this peculiarity until the end. Yes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good.
From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals and was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. With these I spent most of my time, and never was so happy as when feeding and caressing them.
Okay, so Marilise, if you could continue from that. I cannot listen to you.
We cannot hear her, yeah.
Are you listening now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. This peculiarity of character grew with my growth, and in my manhood I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished an affection for a faithful and sagacious dog, I need hardly be at the trouble of explaining the nature or the intensity of the gratification thus derivable.
Thank you very much, both of you. Right, so this is the moment where he's saying like, no, but I love pets, I love animals. I have always loved animals, right? So he's saying that he was even teased when he was a child for his love of animals, because these are like very loving companions. They can offer you all kinds of happy moments with them. Yes. So this is a way of just like making us go on his side, because what he's going to tell us is exactly something that connects to a moment of violence that includes animals, and in particular, this animal, the black cat. Yes, Fab.
Oh, you tell me if I'm being annoying with the number of comments and questions. But I'm just feeling like it's again part of sort of this tradition, this American tradition, with all these writers in the first half of the 19th century there, that they were always trying to convince you that the story is true. Like, I remember now, Rip Van Winkle, Washington Irving starts like, I found this story in the papers of the late Didgeridoo Knickerbocker, and Moby Dick, is the same thing. Like, I've collected all this information throughout my life. Believe me, this story is real, or the Scarlet Letter is the same thing, right? Yeah, I don't know if
the story, like,
right?
Yeah, it is something that is very common, like maybe a document that was found in the, I don't know, the depths of this specific library, and then we are telling the story, and this is how it makes it a little bit more credible.
Yeah, I feel like this is him sort of continuing the same tradition in that sense of, playing with the role of fiction, I suppose, right?
Yes, for sure. I would say you're right. But I also think that what he's trying to say is to make the reader to his side, to make us go on his side, maybe to exemplify that although all of this is true about him, like his sympathy for animals, he is actually an animal lover, right? This is what he's saying to us. He's saying that he loves animals, that he always had pets, and also in the next paragraphs is going to say that his wife was also very fond of animals, and this was something that made their attachment together much more interesting for him, because he loves pets, right? But what he's going to tell us is something that gives us the opposite kind of perception. So I think that all of it, it's there, right? What you said is there for sure. It's a tradition that also it's very common in Gothic fiction, yes. This idea of something that is true to make us believe it. but I think also that what he's trying to do here is playing with our feelings. Yes, playing with the reader and trying to get the readers on his side. Yeah, Jo.
So about what he said, I think this strategy is not only in Gothic novels, but in modern novels it is still used, like in Lolita by Nabokov, right? He tries every time to convince us that the way that he's thinking it justifies the horrible crime he's committing with the girl.
Sure.
So
For sure.
it's still used nowadays.
Yes, and it's a very common technique if you want to say like, how do we justify the unjustifiable, right? This is a very used technique when the narrator or the writer itself wants us to side with the villain, right? Sometimes it is this kind of technique that happens a lot. In Brazilian literature, we do have many examples of which that sometimes we don't even notice that the evils that the villain itself has done, they're actually very serious because we sympathize with them so much that we don't even notice when this is happening. Yes, Aula.
Sorry. Just to comment on that, I agree 100% with you guys, and it's a very, very common device in literature in general, right? If we think about Don Quixote, for example, by Cervantes, he pretends it's a translation from an Arabic original, right? So it would not be his creation, it would be just a translation from another text. Or if we think in The Name of the Rose, for example, by Umberto Eco, is also the same idea of the found manuscript, right? And one of the things that we have to remember here is that the 1800s is the century of philology. So this is the key moment in history in which, like, we are discovering manuscripts for the first time. The Brothers Grimm are collecting fairy tales everywhere. We have many many traditional poems being written down from oral traditions. So it was not so uncommon, actually, for people to discover manuscripts in the 19th centuries. There are many examples that in which that really happened, right? So they're playing around with this, with something that would happen from time to time back then, and it still happens nowadays. I mean, the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, that were discovered a few, I don't know, 30 years ago or something. So this was also tied to developments in archaeology and philology. So it's very interesting because it branches with science as well.
Go ahead, Fabio.
Right, Audio. I was thinking. I think I understand it to be like sort of two different currents. One being the Enlightenment, the end of the 18th century, where, like, for example, Moby Dick, he's all the time like, oh, I don't pretend to be writing like a serious scientific document here, but at the same time he is, and Mark Twain plays around with that a little bit as well. He's like, oh no, yeah, I'm not going to talk about this in this book, maybe in some other I'll tackle this difficult philosophical question of the divine right of kings. And this is one, and I feel like the other, which is what Poe is doing, is he's really trying to bring the other element that is the non-rationality of it, right? I mean, of course, it has to be madness, or because it cannot be magic, right? Because that's the point. If you're rational, if you're a rationalist and enlightened person, he's crazy, right? And that's sort of all his characters, even in the Rue Morgue, the murders of Rue Morgue, it's like you feel like the guy is completely insane, but there is a rational explanation for that. So it's like he's playing with the rationality, scientificism on one hand, but also the superstition or magical or abstract, poetic, let's say, element of on the other side.
Yeah, the supernatural, right? He's always like insisting on the thing that is supernatural and fiendish in some kinds. And so I think like he's playing with all of that throughout the whole text, and this is like a way for also for us as readers to understand how to characterize this narrator to start, right? How, what kind of person is this? Yes, and this is, although he doesn't have like a third person describing this character who's going to commit the crime, he is indicating to us some of the elements on his personality and also what on his attitudes and actions as well. All right, so let's read some other parts connected to it as well. I don't know, Audi, could you read this one for me, please?
For sure. There is something in the unselfish and self-sacrificing love of a brute, which goes directly to the heart of him who has had frequent occasion to test the paltry friendship and gossamer fidelity of mere man. I married early and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat.
Yes. So, well, I think that this paragraph is very interesting, mostly because of this sentence here that he says that the fidelity of mere men, right? The friendship and gossamer fidelity of mere men. So he's saying exactly almost that the friendship of a pet maybe is even truer, more truthful than the friendship of humans, if you can say it like that, right? So then things they start to be even more complex and complicated for us, right? Because how can we refute that as an excuse? Yeah, so something very terrible and supernatural and unexplainable must have happened for this man to do what he did. Yes. No, lots of comments on chat, please. I cannot. I'll read it later, so I can try.
Don't worry, I'm replying to everything. Don't worry.
Very good, thank you. All right, people. So, and then there is this part when he starts adding some of these popular beliefs concerning cats as being black almost. And this is exactly the part where he says that black cats are witches in disguise. Yes. Fabio, do you mind reading this paragraph for us, please?
No. This latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree. In speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, made frequent allusion to the ancient popular notion, which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon this point, and I mentioned the matter at all for no better reason than that it happens just now to be remembered.
Thank you very much. So now he's just like putting the guilt on his wife, like almost like trying to transfer the responsibility to her. But no, it's just like she wouldn't say it seriously. It's just something that she would say just on a regular basis, right? But here again, like he's establishing a dialogue with this kind of popular beliefs and very ancient beliefs that cats might be connected to bad omen or maybe to witchcraft and all of that. Yes. And this is a tradition that we know with certain intimacy. We have heard of that in our culture as well, and it's something that we relate to in some level. But I think that in this story, yes, Paul comes from an American tradition, like from the United States. It even is more like screaming these traditions of the Salem trials and all this idea of hunting witches and such, right? Again, he's coming back to what we have previously stating. And this is a picture of Hermione becoming a cat. I don't know if you remember this from Harry Potter. All right, but then we know that the first event with Pluto happens. He gouges the eyes, he removes it from his body, and then the first cat disappears, and then he runs into having the second cat, the second black cat. But as Fabio well pointed out, this cat has something different about it, yes? And we know that we have like a different kind of detail to this cat, yes? And it says like this: Pluto had not a white hair upon any portion of his body, but this cat had a large, although indefinite splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of the breast, like the chest, right? So this is the difference that marks the first cat, Pluto, his pet, and then the second cat that appears, yes. And for a moment, we might wonder, why would he say this specific detail about the second cat that appears? And well, the possible explanation to that is because establishing a clear dialogue with this popular belief of the Scottish Highlands about the cat sheath or the cat fairy. And this is where we go with the entity, Fabio, that we mentioned in the beginning of the class, yes?
Interesting.
Yes, please, you wanted to say something?
No, just interesting.
Yeah. So the cat fairy was actually an entity itself, right? And it was believed at the time to be able to steal a person's soul before it was claimed by the dogs, yes. So just by like passing over a corpse before burial, yes. To prevent this from happening, these late traditions would say that people would have to host a late wake, a velorio, right? That was performed during the night and the day of the deaths in order to prevent the cat sheath or the cat fairy from stealing the soul of the corpse of the deceased person, right? So these were all done before burial. So very interesting. So it's kind of undeniable that he's establishing a dialogue with this kind of entity, because the description of the second cat and the cat sheath that has, this is a popular, and it dates, like this illustration dates from the time, right? It's referring to the physical description of the cat sheath. Yes, Audrey.
Just to get if I got the story straight, I didn't know about this peculiar thing, Anna. So the cat she or him is stealing the soul of the dead, but the characteristic, but the way we recognize this cat spirit is by the white patch. Right?
The white patch, yeah. This is how it is described in Scottish Highlands traditions, and this is an actual image of that, right? This is not a fandom illustration. This was something that was probably done at a time, although I don't know exactly when, but it's connected to the expression of the mythology, right? So he's clearly establishing a dialogue with that, and some biographers even tell that Scottish knowledge, mythology, and culture tends to reappear a lot in Edgar Allan Poe's stories, because he, or probably because he was adopted by a Scottish man, yes. So we do have this kind of references appearing in other stories, like, for example, in the Cask of Amontillado, last class in the short stories, we were talking about that, how you would establish a dialogue with that as well. And it appears again here, and I wouldn't be surprised if it would appear elsewhere as well. Yes, so not only because of that, but also because we're talking about a work of literature that was done in English language, and of course we do have this cultural connection with Scottish culture as well. Yes. Let me just see the chat. Sorry if I cannot read at the same time, people, because I'm just like doing all sorts of things here. Yes?
I'm answering to everything.
Okay, thank you. All right. So here we have also a connection to other kinds of traditions that we're going to explore in the next few slides. Yes. Because after all of this has happened, we know that he has been considered to be interrupted or suddenly been annoyed with the cat itself. And then when the second cat appears, he finally, we have this moment where he murders his wife, and then he decides that the cat should be next. Yes. But he looks for the cat and he cannot find the cat anywhere. Yes. So can I have another volunteer? Maybe Maria Carolina, I don't know if you would like to read this paragraph for us.
Sure.
If you don't mind, please.
Okay. Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better expedient than either of these. I determined to wall it up in a cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness. It did not make its appearance during the night, and thus, for one night, at least, since its introduction into the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept even with the burden of murder upon my soul.
Thank you. Yeah, so he, after killing his wife, he decides to wall up their victims, his victim, right? And he refers it to this tradition that was conducted by the monks of the Middle Ages. Yes. And then he goes about the house looking for the cat, and he cannot find the cat. Yes. And he just like, okay, maybe the cat is elsewhere. He doesn't maybe think that maybe the cat was inside the wall as well. And if you will have read other stories by Poe, you're going to see that, for example, in the Castle of Amontillado, the idea of immurement, which is this tradition of walling up victims of some kind, maybe as a prosecution for something, or maybe as a punishment for something. It tends to be consistent. This kind of activity was done not only by the monks in the Middle Ages, but also in the ancient world, also in the Greek world, and even before that, right? We have reports of that, those activities being conducted in Samaria, Syria, and other kinds of societies in the ancient world. Yes, an example of that is the immurement act that would be like the life entombment or walling up the victims, or not the victims, but these were like sacrificial persons and virgins that would be punished for not being true to their first oath, right? This would be very much connected to the case of the Vestal virgins, which would be women, virgin women that were devoted to the goddess Vesta, and their work would be like to praise the god, to care for the temple, and also to maintain their virginity for the whole of their lives. And if they failed to remain virgins for the whole of their lives, they would be punished with immurement. Yes. And what is something very interesting that we see in the story is that he is immuring, he's walling up a woman as well, a woman who is his wife. Yeah. So again, he is establishing dialogue with all sorts of traditions, culture, and mythologies around different kind of topics. Yes. All right, people, we still have some minutes, and maybe we could talk a little bit more about like that. I don't know if you have any comments, because we only have like 10 minutes to maybe discuss this story. So I think it would be much more productive if we skip the questions, and if you would maybe talk about your perceptions and impressions of the short story freely, because we don't have much time. My plan originally in a book a month, we have fewer people in the groups. So we are able to create different kinds of questions to be discussed in smaller groups, so everybody has the possibility and opportunity to speak their mind. Yes, but since we are in a bigger group today, we don't have nor time nor the room for everybody to speak. But I invite you all just to tell me what was your perception of the story, if you enjoyed reading it or not, if you have any other comments that you would like to share with us, maybe anything that you would like to say concerning the story. Yeah, Ju, please.
I would just like to thank you. It's the first time I am on this class. I found out about your profile today, and I really liked it. I know just a little about Edgar Allan Poe's writings, and this class has been amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here, for reading the story, right? I really like Edgar Allan Poe. I think he's a type of writer, although writing about polemic stuff like killing cats and wives, he has this allurement which is very much connected with our will to read horror stories. And I don't know, do you in general like horror stories? Oh, sorry, Aula, would you like to say something?
Just don't forget, I still have a few slides in which I have to speak.
For sure.
So perhaps I can speak first, and then we can do this. The comments afterwards. It would just take 5 minutes, but go ahead, Marilise. After Marilise speaks,
and then we go there.
I'm not very good at speaking, but try. One thing that I caught my attention is at first I thought, before reading, I thought the evil element would be the cat, but then it was totally the opposite. The narrator was the worst people in the world. I mean, totally the opposite. So I was surprised by that. That's just this comment.
Although he wants us to believe that the cat has done something supernatural to make him be evil, right? Which is an interesting technique. Very nice. Thank you, Marilise. Marilia, please.
Well, I just would like to add that I had the same impression as Marilise's. Yes, when I started reading, I thought the evil was Black Cat. So since we have these ideas of Black Cats, and yes, I read some books from Edgar Allan Poe. But I love short stories. That's why I'm here. So that's why it called my attention. And it was awesome, this discussion about the elements of the story and the story itself. So yes, thank you.
Great, thank you, Marilia.
Just to comment on that, Marilia, that's precisely what he's doing, right? Manipulating our expectations, right? That's why he's using a black cat, as Anna asked us in the beginning. Could he use another animal? Yeah, perhaps he could, but then we would not be expecting I don't know, the black dog to be the evil one, right? So he's directing our attention in order to create this surprise, to create this literary effect, right?
Yes, he is inviting us to read his short story. Yes, and it worked.
Good. Very nice. All right. Okay, people, so let's just, we do have some extra slides that I actually almost forgot. Thank God that Aula is here and he reminded me. And then we can go back to listening to your perceptions as well, right? We can stay a little bit longer and continue the discussion. All right, cool.
Okay, guys, so just to explain to you what happened today. So this is an example of our classes in the short stories course. It is designed for people that love literature, love to read, want to practice English on a weekly basis. So you would have, we offer weekly classes every Tuesday at 7 p.m. and they last for an hour and a half. And then every week we discuss a different short story by several authors we usually discuss at least 2 short stories per author, but it varies a bit. Like Edgar Allan Poe, we discussed 3, for example.
3, yeah.
And can you go ahead, Anna? But we also have another type of a course that is called novels, and we have 2 different classes. One, it's for intermediate English, the other one for advanced. We're not very picky on that. It's more for the students to orient themselves. When we choose the books, in the intermediate level, we will choose things that are that have a little bit simpler syntax or not such a high literary vocabulary, but we only use original texts. We do not use abridged versions or facilitated altered texts. And in this case, in the novels course, we read a book a month, just like the name of the school, right? So the idea is that we meet only twice a month, so once every 2 weeks. The classes are a bit longer. They last for 2.5 hours. We have a break in the middle, and then we read in one class, we discuss the first half of the book, and in the other class we discuss the second half. And usually books are about 100 to 150 pages. Sometimes on the advanced course we get to 200, but we try to choose things that are not so long, because nobody has as much time as one would wish, right? And so these are the 2 courses we offer. One, it depends on the amount of free time you would have to read either short stories or novels. And usually we organize and we choose the authors or the novels thinking on literary genres or some thematic connection of some kind. And this semester we're talking about Gothic fiction, especially ghost stories, and in a transition to sci-fi. So that we already finished yesterday the discussions of The Turn of the Screw, a great classic by Henry James, and we're starting in 2 weeks discussing The Haunting of Hill House, which in my opinion is the best, is the real masterpiece of ghost fiction. And it's amazing. It's absolutely brilliant. Yes, yeah. Anna?
No, we're just going to say that usually I'm not very much of a fan of horror fiction in general, but I actually changed my mind after reading The Haunting of Hill House. This is how good it is.
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah. And then we'll read Lovecraft at the Mountains of Madness. It's about an expedition that goes to Antarctica, and it's very cool because he mixed the traditions of ghost stories with aliens. So it's pretty interesting. There's a transition there from Gothic fiction into more like sci-fi style. And then we discuss Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, which is an hilarious book, very nice. And which also deals with alien abductions and World War II. So it's a very satirical and critical of society. And finally, another pop culture classic, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is also a very, very funny, that is a very funny book. So we're talking about ghost stories in sci-fi. Please go ahead, Anna. And so you have the adorable cow being abducted. And then in the advanced course, we're talking about different perspectives on love. So we decided to work with love stories, but also ironic love stories. We have everything, a little bit of the lovey-dovey, a little bit of the satirical, a little bit of the tragic love. We started with Jane Austen, the book that in my opinion is her best, The Persuasion, which I adore. I know it's the case of Anna too. We are starting in 2 weeks to discuss, sorry, somebody said something? No? In 2 weeks, we're starting to discuss E.M. Forster, a great classic as well, A Room with a View, super funny, very ironic. Then we'll discuss a little bit of detective stories with Agatha Christie. And in a book a month, we also try to discuss world literature in general. We're not only focusing on what is written in Britain or the US, but also thinking about literature in a global perspective. That's why from time to time we work with books in translation. So this time we're reading Elena Ferrante, which is an Italian author, very nice. She's alive and writing, so he's one of the great contemporary writer. We're discussing The Lost Daughter. And finally, Michael Cunningham, The Hours. This book won the Pulitzer Prize, very nice one. Virginia Woolf is one of the characters, for example, is all about Mrs. Dalloway and things. So those are our readings for the novels course, and all based on love. Can you go ahead, Anna?
Let me just say something, because for the advanced course, we are finishing Jane Austen from this week and the next, right? So we finished Jane Austen for the Saturday group tomorrow, and then for the Thursday group next week. So if by any chance you would like to join the course and still read some of Jane Austen, you would still have like a live class in order to join and to discuss it as well. Yes.
And yeah, so those are our readings in September. In the short story course, we will also read 2 stories by Shirley Jackson. Who is the author? We are also working in the intermediate course with The Hunting of the Hill House, and in the advanced course, we'll talk about E.M. Forster, one of the great authors of 20th century English literature. Okay, so thank you very much for being here, guys. We always love to offer these open classes. It's a great pleasure to have you. And if you're interested, just drop us a message in WhatsApp. You're more than welcome in our courses.
Yes, very good. And again, people, thank you all for joining us today in a Friday evening, right, of all days, because like this is usually the time that we have to do this kind of things. As you know, like both of us, we are also academics. We do have like an academic career, and we teach, and also we always try to give like the best for you. But I know that sometimes Friday is not the best day to do that. But thank you very much, everyone. If you have any other comments that you would like to say about your reading, something that you would like to share, you're more than welcome to do that now. As you can either do on chat or maybe just unmute your microphone and share it with us. Any final comments? No? All right, people. So thank you all. I'm seeing all the thank yous on chat. Thank you all for coming. Luigi, you wanted to say something? I saw your mute. Yeah, okay, good. Do you want to say something? No? Okay, so I think it's just a coincidence, maybe.
So can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, so I read The Black Cat for the first time when I was 13, and I remember that as a kid I was very shocked of like how someone can think about this kind of situation. You know, it's uncomfortable. And now as an adult, reading the story again, I thought about Ted Bundy, you know, the serial killer, and a line that he said, we psychopaths are your husbands, your sons, your friends. So I kind of connected this story to this line because in the story, the narrator tries to convince us that he's good, he's a good person, and he describes himself as a good son, you know, he's, you know, and
now good husband, right?
Yes, that shows how someone can go from good to evil very quick, and you don't know that in our social, you know, you don't know if someone by your side it is good or really evil, you know, if it's hidden. It's just, that's the only comment I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. it's creepy how manipulative he is, right? As Ari was commenting. But this is like the effect of fiction as well, right? This is how the story becomes even more like engaging and entertaining in a way, because what he's doing is actually creating this tension for us and trying to make us feel a little bit like divided in what kind of opinion we're going to have about this narrator, about this character, right? Very good. Thank you very much for your comment. Any more comments, people? No? All right. Okay, so we thank you very much for joining us here in this class. And yeah, so after this, like for people who are watching us on YouTube, after we finish the class, this is going to be recorded and transferred as a recording to YouTube. Yes. And then we can.
So if you want to send to anyone, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, if you want to share the class with someone that would be interested in the topic, yes. We also have some open classes that are already on YouTube, some about Super Fork Saves Tokyo by Haruki Murakami, another one by how to read better in a foreign language, and also another one similar to this by Ernest Hemingway, A Clean, Well-Lighted Place. Yeah, so also feel free to watch those if you didn't participate in the first ones. Yes. Thank you very much from the bottom of our hearts, and have a great weekend and a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take good care.
Bye, Marilise.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye, Vanderlei.